Rock Solid Families wants to thank Maxwell Construction for sponsoring the Rock Solid Families podcast. For over 30 years, Maxwell Construction has been a leader in turning dreams into realities, building schools, banks, restaurants, and many other commercial and public facilities. Maxwell Construction has made it their priority to not just build buildings, but to build into their community. So if you have any construction needs, call them at 812-537-2200.
Welcome to the Rock Solid Families podcast. I'm Linda Hutchinson here with my husband, Merrill, my teammate, my partner in life.
What do you think? We're getting ready to play a ball game here or what? Teammate?
Well, we just finished our Summer of Love series. And so, I wanted everyone to know that you are my partner in life.
Yep. You're stuck with me. Yeah. But what's that have to do with our show?
Well,
Summer Love thing's over.
Yeah.
So,
well, no.
it's done. It's done. We did our 5-part. You guys, you better brush up. By the way, we should say, the assessments are still available if people want to go through and do that and go back through that. I've had several people who've been commenting on that was kind of fun. Or that was kind of interesting, or that shined some light on some things. So if you haven't gone through our Summer of Love series yet, tune in, go do it.
Yes. So that was what we did in July, but we're in August now. And so the teammate part is about what we're going to be talking about today. And that is that you and I have got to be on the same team and united when it comes to how we set limits and set boundaries for our kids. And so that's where we're heading today.
So we can beat our kids, you mean?
No, I didn't say that.
What do you mean? Don't you feel that way sometimes?
Gracious.
Don't you feel that way sometimes?
I'm not saying that on camera.
No, not beat your kids, but sometimes you feel like it is
frustrated?
A battle with kids and parents, and it's a matter of who's going to win certain things. And so you get into power struggles with your kids. And so that's a lot of what we're talking about, the idea of coming together, husband and wife, mom and dad, and saying, okay, first off, we are the adults in the home, and we do own a responsibility to manage this home well. The kids do not have that responsibility to run the home. We do. But if we're not united, if we're not teammates, if we're not coming together, we will feel like we're in a losing battle. And it's not one that wins for anybody, especially for your kids. Your kids do not win long term. They might think they win when they get that little extra scoop of ice cream or, a little extra stay up late time because one parent gives them that. But long term, they lose in this situation.
I had a chuckle when you said, and we're the adults. Then why don't we act like it sometimes? Sometimes we act like the 2-year-old and we're throwing the temper tantrum or we're yelling to the top of our lungs and no one's listening to us. And so sometimes that means saying no. Sometimes that means setting limits. But it should always mean that as a parent, as parents, you have a plan. And too many parents are just flying by the seat of the pants, and just building the plane as they're flying it, as my old boss used to say. And that is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. This show also comes timely with we're kind of coming into that start of school season. You're into this August season. And so that whole idea of trying to manage a home that tends to crank up the busyness when we get into the school year, because there's a lot more on the calendar, but there's also more demands being placed on all of the individuals. The kids have homework now. They have sport responsibilities. You have to take care of your job and home responsibilities. And so people, they get a little bit more stressed. And when that stress starts to happen, you get emotions involved. And so this is where kids will kick back. I'm tired of doing this. I don't want to.
I don't want to get a football practice. I don't want to sit in the car again.
Yeah. And so these are the things like, okay, we are purposely putting this show at this time to that mom and dad will come together. And, you guys know a lot of this stuff, but sometimes you have to hit the old reset button and go, okay, summer's over. We developed a few habits over the summer that weren't necessarily good. And now let's kind of readdress and move into the school year.
I had a conversation with a parent just this week about that. Like they really got into some bad habits. They lost their routines. They kind of just got willy-nilly.
Are you talking about our house? Is that...
And, and it not just as parents, if you're listening, you're like, hey, been there, done that. I'm bought the t-shirt. Sometimes as grandparents, it bleeds off into grandparents because parents are so stressed and overwhelmed that they're calling in the grandparents for reinforcements or babysitters or chaperones or carpools. And so if you're a parent or a grandparent of a child of any age, please stay tuned. This show is for you. But before we get to it, we want to thank our sponsors.
Yeah, so today we want to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions and Maxwell Construction for supporting the Rock Solid Family Podcast. So we thank our sponsors who just believe in the messaging that we're putting out. And then not just the messaging here on Rock Solid Radio, but also the in the office, on the front line work that we actually do in person with couples and families and stuff. So they just sponsor and support a lot of what we do. And so we just want to thank those guys.
Yeah. And if you're new to the Rock Solid Families podcast, welcome. Rock Solid Families podcast is part of a bigger entity called Rock Solid Families. And we are a faith-based coaching organization located in the greater Cincinnati, Ohio area, right across the river in Southeast Indiana. And so you can check us out at rocksolidfamilies.org and see who we are and what we're about. And, we just would love for you to connect with us and to walk alongside us and really help share the messages that we're trying to put out because they're so important and there's so many messages out there. Why not promote the ones that are healthy for our families and our kids?
Yeah. And, earlier this month, we had our 5-year celebration down at the Music on the River in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. And we kind of used that opportunity to host a bit of a party. And it's really just a thank you party. But here's what the thank you is about. It is about the people who believe in not just rock solid families, but the messaging of Christ for families and marriages. And so we want to thank all of you guys. And if you want to come alongside of us and help, either, it could be sponsoring the show. It could be just making donation. You can earmark a donation to say, hey, I'm going to give X number of dollars, and I would like this to actually go to help pay for somebody's session who is maybe cost stretched right now and they can't afford it. And so, you can earmark that. We have people do that all the time. Hey, I'm going to pay for 5 sessions for somebody who's in need. So these are the things, guys, that really help continue to get the messaging that family and marriage is one of the biggest ways that we solve the problems that ail us, not just in our community, but out in this entire country and worldwide.
Yeah, we are celebrating our 5-year anniversary this year. And since we opened our doors in October of 2023, we have seen over 1,000 different family units.
We opened in 2018 since we opened our doors in 2018.
5 years ago, you're right.
Because otherwise we haven't opened yet.
2023 is this year. And so since we started, we've seen over 1,000 family units. Sometimes we'll see the family or we'll see the couple and we'll see a child. But just this year alone, and we're only in our 8th month, that we've seen over 200 different families, new families, just in the past 7 months. So it's because of our clients and our listeners who continue to spread the word and share these shows. And it's because of you that we're able to offer help and hope to more and more people every year. So thank you. Thank you for your support.
And can we just tell you that we hired our new coach, Meredith, just a couple of months ago, and the girl is already surpassing the number of appointments that Linda and I have because of the clientele she's working with. She's primarily working with the younger kids up into the teen years and young adult years, and I would say more towards the girls and women in those young teen years. And so there is a huge cry out for help in that area. And gosh, I hate to say this, this is good and bad. I can see very soon where we're going to have to be expanding even again to help cover that population.
So we crunched some numbers, and just this past 7 months, 25% of our clients, our families, are working with children under the age of 21. And so that means they're teens, they're young adults, and that's a fourth of the clients that we see. And so, it's just crazy. And so this really comes back to, Hun, the subject of our show today.
Right.
Because if we had helped our children at a very young age feel safe and secure and supported and guided and helping them to set limits, we wouldn't have the problems we're seeing today. Honestly, I don't think we would.
Not at this level.
Not at this level. Yeah. And so you can make a difference in your own home. And so that's why we're doing this show.
Remember, guys, everybody is out for a market to reach into, whether it's the media, social media, whether it's product, whatever. Like everybody wants to try to sell a message. We've seen this even in the bigger corporate world of whether it's Bud Light or Target. I mean, rather than selling a product such as a towel or a bed sheet, we're going to sell a message.
Yeah.
And so I do hope that at some point in time, stores and stuff like that just go back to selling product and get their social stuff behind the scene where we don't need to see any of that garbage, keep it in their own home. But you have to remember that the biggest consumer in this group that they go after first and foremost are the most vulnerable of the kids. Okay. And so this is why, Hun, that we're talking. If you don't even know what you stand for in your home, somebody else is going to tell you or your kids what to stand for.
Yeah.
And so this is extremely important stuff that you go back and you reclaim what is God given to you, your kids. You reclaim them.
Yeah. And that's our disclaimer. So as parents, you've got to know what your values are before you can set healthy boundaries. And, Proverbs 29:18 says, where there is no vision, the people perish in King James Version. So if you're aiming for nothing, you're bound to hit it. And so we can't help you if you and your partner, if you as a family do not identify and really fight for the values in your home.
You might be saying right now as you're listening to this, yeah, that sounds good, but I'm a single mom, I'm a single dad, me and my ex, we don't get along. Okay. Like, first off, we'll say, yeah, you're right.
It stinks.
Like, that stinks. And that's why divorce stinks. And that's why that's not God's way. Okay. He doesn't make it not possible. He says, if that's what you have to do, okay. But it's not his way. And right here is kind of why, because God has established how necessary it is that you and Linda and I talk all the time about playing tag team. when life is wearing you down or your kids are wearing you down, and sometimes you can go, okay, your turn, or I need your help, or you seem to approach this differently and better than I do. But here's what I'll say. If you are single and you are in the parenting phase and trying to hear what this message is today, I have people, Linda has people all the time. We have couples that even though they're broken and divorced, and the marriage side, they will come together for the sake of, okay, let's just talk about how we're going to parent.
Yes.
And so putting your personal issues to the side and saying, as for our kids, we have to be united, okay? And so we even go so far as to say because, Hun, you mentioned before about grandparents being involved. And so we will have sometimes maybe mom's raising the child, but the child spends 30 or 40% of their time at grandma and grandpa's for childcare or whatever reason. You've now moved grandparents out of a grandparenting role, and you moved them by the nature of your expectation into a parenting role. And so we actually want them in on the parenting value establishment, okay? And so this is so important, Hun. Just like you said, the very first thing we do is we better stop assuming what the house is going to value, and we better start saying intentionally, in our home, this is what we value.
Yes. And I know that if you're listening, and the anger may be welling up as Merrill's speaking, because you have a very uncooperative ex. And I get that because I work with those women who have these very power-hungry, manipulative exes who, just to spite you, will want to go against what your values are. Okay, then in your home, as much as it's in your control this is what you fight for. And so, yes, you can't control what happens in the other home, but you can control what's happening under your roof. And so that's when we can come in and walk alongside you and support you in really identifying what is healthy, what is a power struggle, and what is really healthy. And so why even establish boundaries though, Hun? Let's talk a little bit about the why, because this is really important. We want to really emphasize that this is not really an option you want to leave out, because it does have such effects down the road.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that. So earlier we were talking about the craziness of summer, and everybody loves summer. Like, oh, finally you get a break.
Yeah.
You know, you can break routines, you can sleep in, you can do different things. Okay. And those are good. We actually call those vacations, and those are good things. All right. But when they become the norm of the day, so to speak, all of a sudden weird things start to happen. Okay. And so lack of routine or lack of boundary actually increases people's anxiety. It increases their lack of feeling of purpose and meaning in their life. All right. So not only do we see this with lack of routine in a kid's life, we will see this with people who go into retirement. And so at the other end of the spectrum, here they are, can't wait to retire. And 2 months into retirement, they're kind of going, and we see anger or anxiety or depression kicking in. And so routine is extremely important. Boundaries are important. And so, you know, the idea here is your kids don't like boundaries, but the idea is if you actually give a kid a boundary, he will then feel secure and know exactly where he can go. Yep. And especially insecure kids, when they don't have routines, they actually some will just blow over and go way out, and we think of them as being wild and crazy, and some will become nearly paralyzed because they're afraid. They don't know how far to push, so they don't push at all.
Yeah. You mentioned kind of blowing up out and crazy. We call that dysregulation.
Right.
And dysregulation looks really in the form of tantrums or, you know, outbursts or pushback. And that's a child who feels insecure and unsafe. And so the limits and the boundaries, if done well, can really help bring that in and lower the anxiety, lower the stress. It also heightens EQ. Emotional intelligence is developed through limits and boundaries and routines to help a child know and become self-disciplined.
Yeah. So right off the bat, this school year, as you're starting to jump into your school and fall season, here are 3 routines that are what we would think of as no-brainers. Okay. Yeah. They're relatively easy to say, yeah, this is just a time we should do this. One would be a bedtime routine. Okay. And we would even start the bedtime routine before the school starts. And I would even consider it on the weekends. Like sometimes we have kids that were like, oh, finally the weekend. And instead of going to bed at 8 or 9, we would let them stay up forever. And then we wonder why Mondays are like from some other planet. Okay.
Or the next day.
Yeah. So it just kind of depends on your kiddo, but bedtime routine, especially for the younger ones, but even for the older ones, is extremely important. The second part of that is the morning routine. Okay. The morning routine in terms of, does your family do a breakfast, or do the kids, have to walk to a bus stop or whatever? Do they pack their book bag before they go to bed at night, or is it a mad rush in the morning and we're trying to look for books and Chromebooks and all these things? It's like, okay, guys, here's what we're doing. I want all of your lunches packed the night before and laid out. I want all of your, whatever
clothes,
it is. Yeah. You got a practice, a school sport afterwards. Like, when you put that in place, 1, you're teaching them some organization, but 2, you're all of a sudden giving them security. They're not running around at 5 till bus pickup going, oh my gosh, I don't have this, which is jacked up anxiety. Okay. Yep. And so we're just trying to teach them how to regulate by establishing some routines.
When COVID hit and school shut down and kids were home and parents were home, it was kind of neat at first, but then we started to get out of the routines. And I've had families that have come to me where there was no bedtime. There was no bedroom. Like they could sleep on the couch and fall asleep on the couch, or they crawled in with mom and dad because no one had to go to work the next day. And can I just tell you, and we've said it in many, many shows, the family bed is not a great idea. It sounds great on paper. It's a lousy idea to set boundaries for children. And also as a couple to have that own privacy where your child's not in your space all the time. There needs to be a boundary there of your room, your bed, their room.
And then let's talk about what we would consider. This is how Linda and I can put ourselves out of a job. Okay? Listen to us, guys. All right? The dinner routine, the dinner table routine outside of bedtime, and maybe even equal or more important, depending on your family dynamic, the dinner table routine is how you actually do parenting and counseling, preventative work. And we have seen the dinner table go bye-bye because of busy schedules, lack of priority,
sports,
just unintentional work towards the dinner table. And guys, the dinner table is where your kids actually get to know how things operate, how to learn a voice in the matter, how to get comfortable in situations. And so
sharing their day. Decompressing
and
their stress.
And empathy, right? Empathy is huge, just in the sense of, hey, your little brother's talking, so let's listen to his story. Just something as simple as that while we're out, eating a burger at the table is enough to go, oh, I need to be quiet right now. Okay.
But and again, I understand that coaches are putting these expectations on 7-year-olds that they're going to have practice every night right after school for hours. But can you just back up and say, what is this doing to our family? That we're literally not even home at dinner time. We're eating out of a car through a drive-through. We're sitting on the side of a field and nobody is even sitting down together and decompressing their day and unpacking their time. I'm just telling you, it's taking a toll on our families and our kids. They need that routine. So please, mom and dad, these are just 3 simple routines that we have found and in our work and in our home that if we can establish them as important boundaries that we're going to protect, we're going to fight for, we're going to establish, it really does make a difference in the health and wellness of our kids.
Guys, we know that in sports, in the military, in the corporate world, whenever they're in the middle of a project or an intense work, when that day is done, they always do a debriefing. And they do a debriefing because they have to go through the processing. Okay, how did it go today? What do we have to do tomorrow? What's going on? How did you feel? What's up here? Like we know those are winning strategies. I mean, that's what every football team does. Now, it doesn't mean they sit there for 24/7 at the debriefing table. There's work to be done, but they take time to debrief and process as they're working through the project, right? And why we have felt like the family can go on autopilot is really kind of beyond us. And so dinner time routine is that debriefing moment. And sometimes, it'll be kind of dead and boring. Okay. But what you've done is you've established the routine so that on that one day when maybe something has come up big, you've already got a vehicle to process it.
Yeah. And we really encourage that for you as a couple too, alone, away from the kids, in that debriefing time we call the heart check. We've talked about that before in our Summer of Love series. So the second part about establishing boundaries, after you establish the routines and come together and decide what are we going to fight for, and that is to be clear and consistent, because invisible boundaries are really no boundaries at all. And if you're vague and blurry and you say dinner's important, but then you're always busy and you always run over and you never have dinner together, like that's not going to make the kids feel secure.
Guys, and when I work with couples, I refer to this as act like a cop. Okay. And that doesn't mean to act like a police officer and throw handcuffs on your kid. What it means is we know that if you're driving down the road and it's an unmarked road for speed limit, you're kind of going, well, what is the speed limit here? Okay. And so right now it puts up a high degree of abuse, of dysregulation, because, no one's telling me what I can do
There's
here.
no guidelines.
Yeah, there's no guidelines. Okay. So there's kind of this assumed thing. And that just can get dangerous depending on the person. The other side is, let's say we go ahead and we post all the speed limits. So we post a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit up and down this road. But we've driven that road for 20 years, and we drive 80 on that road all the time, and no one in the history of the road has ever been pulled over. Well, that's a lack of enforcement. So that's as good as no speed limit at all. And so what you're saying there is post the signs. So tell your kids, this is what I expect, right? In advance. We don't shock our kids, right? Those are called speed traps, okay? And you don't like them when you're driving. And so we're not trying to trap our kids. But then when our kids do violate whatever we have laid out clearly, we don't have to lose our mind. We have to say, just like a police officer would do, here is your ticket. You can take that up with the courts, okay? And it's an unemotional interchange.
Yeah. So your no needs to be no and your yes needs to be yes. And you have to have clear consequences laid out ahead of time. Don't surprise them. If you let them go over to their friend's house, make sure they know the boundaries. You're not running up to the store, and you're not, whatever the rules are, that they're understanding of that, and they know if they cross that line. So it is important to be clear and consistent, as well as, be firm, but stay in control. And so, yes, the Bible says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Don't flip and flop. It doesn't help your child in the long run. And so they may push back. Good chance they will push back. They may even throw a little temper tantrum. But if they know, if I yell and scream and kick for 5 minutes, they're going to give in. They're going to do that 5 minutes because you have showed them there really isn't a consequence to follow.
No, well, I like the way you talk about stay in control.
Yeah.
Because the idea there is, on a regular basis, we have parents that come in and believe in their heart of hearts that they discipline. And when you start to fish through this, you hear things like, I yelled at them the other day.
I told them 1,000
times. And so, guys, these are not matters of being in control, right? Control means that your emotions are checked. And you are stating your yes and your yes and your no and your no and these kinds of things. And you're not elevating, you're not repeating, okay? You're a commander in chief, right? You say what you need to say and you stick to it. And so actually one of the best ways to see how your parenting is going is if you are a yeller and a screamer and a repeater, you are not doing discipline. You are just acting out emotionally. And especially a hard kid, they will soon recognize the emptiness of that. And a hard kid will start calling you on it and push the buttons even more because they know there's really nothing to back it up.
Yeah. And stay respectful. I don't want you to stoop to their level. I mean, if they're throwing nasty things your way or trying to hit you below the belt, don't stoop to their level. That mentions your earlier point about being an adult. Like, please don't throw the garbage just back at them. Stay respectful, stay calm, but stay firm on what are the boundaries and what are the consequences if they pass those boundaries up.
Yeah. So our next point, so it sounds like we've been in a lot of discipline mode.
Yeah.
And so what I would kind of encourage here is when you're in discipline mode, be in discipline mode. Okay. You're not their buddy and their friend and all of that.
You're not
you're
laughing
not trying
while
to be
you're yelling
silly.
at them.
Yeah. So when you're in discipline mode, you go in and you be that firm commander. You be that police officer. You write that ticket. But that doesn't mean that's limited to who you are. Okay. Because when that is done, you don't lord it over them for the rest of their life. And instead, you use every opportunity you can to build who they are. And this is where the praise comes in. This is where, you're like, hey, dude, like, thanks for helping me out with that. Hey, bud, like you're working in a way that is encouraging and praising of them. Hey, thanks so much for helping me bring those groceries in, man. I thought I was going to die carrying those things. I would have not been able to do that without you. Like these kinds of things are just those, they don't have to be grand. They don't have to be, in fact, we're telling you, don't go out and the kids bring the groceries in and you give them $10. Like, no, your praise, because you are their hero by the nature of your being a parent, your praise means everything to them. So get out of your discipline mode And when all is well, you just really talk about encouraging and praising them.
Yes. What's praised is repeated. So please try to catch them in those moments of them cleaning the dishes or, they're helping you with the laundry. And then lastly is make sure you take the time to have fun with your kids. Last night we sat around the dinner table. We had a guest with us at dinner and afterwards we're like, hey, ice cream sounds really good. And so they're kind of looking like.
None of us needed that either, by the way.
No. And the cool thing was there was no special reason. And it was just because. And so we've got to take that time to really have some fun with the kids. If they're feeling like lorded over, as you said, and too many rules, you want it to be a place where it is structure, where it is safe, secure, but that they also know that they can make mistakes, because the other part of that is extending grace. You and I need grace, they need grace. But please make sure that you're consistent, but yet grace-filled. It's a hard thing to bring together, but they're both really important.
Yeah, Ephesians 6:4 says, "Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord." And so exasperate, to beat them down.
Yeah.
Well, I told you, last time you didn't do this, or remember the other day when you messed up. And so it's just constant. And Linda and I have been guilty of this.
Yeah.
Like when we
Frustrated
and we see our kids not quite doing what we wanted them to do. And it just triggers old memories back of the past things. And we have to do our best to say, okay, listen, we actually already dealt with that.
Yeah.
And anything I'm saying right now is just throwing old trash.
Yeah. Yeah. Jesus came on this earth to be full of grace and full of truth, John 1:14 says. And so he's calling us to be full of grace and full of truth. It's hard. It's a hard dance, but it's one that we need to do for our families. Here's some warning signs, hon, as we close, that you need to really, that there needs to be help, that we need to clarify or create some boundaries. One is that you're doing for your child things that they should be doing for themselves. The law of responsibility says the buck stops with them. So encourage your child to do as much as they're capable of, age appropriate, of course. But I've had parents who are still dressing their child at age 7, 8, 9 years old. It's like, no, they need to be learning how to dress themselves.
On a regular basis, when I worked in the school, I would have parents pick their kids up from the school, and I would see this, and I would just kind of make me cringe. Yeah. So if any of you did this, you'll know that I was cringing. The kid comes in and says, "Hey, Mom, hey, Dad," and they immediately put their book bag out so that Mom or Dad can carry them. And the parent would just take it and go, "Okay, hey, buddy, how you doing?" It's like, again, the occasional favor is one thing, okay? But the idea that when you show up, you immediately carry them is not a good term for helping them be that self-sufficient person that ultimately you're going to want them to be.
Hey, school is starting. And so our rule of thumb is we know that you're going to forget things. And so we extend some grace. We will come up and bring you something one time a semester. So it's your Chromebook or your backpack or important paper. But after that, there's consequences, and you're going to have to deal with not having it, because if they know that they could forget whenever they want their lunch, their homework, and you'll bring it up, then you're not teaching them to be responsible for their own stuff. And so that's kind of where we've landed with that.
Yeah, and they might have a bad day that day, but that bad day actually becomes your discipline tool. So you don't have to wear it out when they come home and say, I'm sick and tired of bringing your stuff up to. No, let them experience the consequence. Yep. The teacher and the matter at school will take care of itself, and you will just go, good. I didn't really have to get all upset about that.
Your teachers don't want you to have to keep bringing them up. They want your child to be responsible. And if you find yourself badgering your child over and over and over again, repeating yourself like we said, you need to set some clear boundaries.
Yeah. We talk all the time about whether you look at your house as a child-centered home. And so child-centered really means like my kids are the most important thing to me. My kids are number one. And so we really ask you to reconsider that. How about let's make it a God-centered home? and then a mom and dad or family centered from the sense of mom and dad are the authority figure, okay? And it's not to take away from your kids. It's actually to build into your kids on a long-term play out that they actually learn how to build something greater than just themselves. They build a family, they build relationships. And so the child-centered home in and of itself sounds great on paper. It's extremely dangerous, and it's where entitlement comes from.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, we skip that one as to why to have boundaries. It curbs that entitlement and also those impulsivities. If they feel like whatever they say goes, they're just going to fly off the seat of their pants. They need to know that no, mom and dad have the final say. You don't call the shots in the house. Another one is sometimes we see this with older teenagers is that parents, especially single parents, will turn to their child and almost treat them like a friend or a colleague, and they'll lean on them too much. They'll tell them too much. They'll give them way too much freedom because they want a friend to go places with or talk to. And so please set a healthy boundary. You're the parent. So treat your child lovingly, but as a child.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's just like you said, I can't say any more to that. They're not in a position to have the wisdom you are. So let's see. The idea, the next one here is, man, we love when our kids are being successful. We love when they're having fun and they're experiencing, something maybe that just brings life to them. And we need to help celebrate that with them, but we cannot dream for them. We cannot assume that that what they're going to do in life is going to be what we want them to do. Like you're going to play ball, you're going to wrestle, you're going to do these things because you see the goodness in it. Okay. At the end of the day, we have to kind of back off. We expose our kids to a lot of different options and opportunities, but your kid's wired differently than you. One thing I'll say to that, Hun, is and this is hard because kids, we're all wired differently, right? Like we always talked about, man, we hope our kids are somehow involved in sports or athletics.
If they're chess players, we're in trouble.
If they're chess players, like, oh, what are we going to do? Hang out around our house. So looking for common things that the two of you can enjoy together. That's where the longer term kind of play for the friendship when they become later teens and adults can start to formulate. But, the idea that they're just winning trophies in something that you happen to love.
Right.
Listen, I loved cycling and riding bikes. And when our older son started racing, I mean, I just loved the racing, right? But I also will tell you that, like, it was hard not to, like, I wanted to know his training. I wanted to know all that stuff. It's like, no, this is his training.
Right.
This is his place.
You can't want it more than he does or she does. Yeah. And you can't live your life through your children. So if you were an up-and-coming baseball player who got injured in high school or college and your son is playing baseball, be really, really careful that this is their dream, okay? Do not force your dreams onto them. That's crossing the line, and you're going to get a resentful child as they get older, feeling like you pushed them into something they really didn't want. The last one, Hun, is just really that the fact is you're going to get pushback from your kiddos. And so you're really going to have to evaluate, again, am I living my life through them, or is this healthy that I'm asking this boundary of them? Don't feel guilty for holding on to healthy boundaries. You're going to get pushback. They're not going to like it, but in the long run, they're going to thank you because that provided that security and safety all of our children need.
I'll add one more point, and that is the idea of as a baseline, we say we never negotiate with our kids. In other words, we don't go back and forth and say your bedtime's at 8, and they go, well, how about 8:30 or how about 9?
Man,
And we go back. No, we don't negotiate with our kids. We work to establish an understanding of the value system of the home. And when our children start to recognize what we value in our home and they're showing that they're honoring that, then that can start to open the door to them actually having some discussion. Because now they're saying, hey, Dad, I don't know if I really want to play ball anymore. And now you're like, okay, well, tell me Tell me, because I know now you're 15 years old and you've shown me that you respect our home and our values. So now I can trust that it's not because you want to go out and smoke weed, right? Or go out and do your own little thing. And so first, we are always working the underlying value system. Because at the end of the day, that's what your kid's going to walk out of your home with. And if it's a value system that only values them, then you certainly do not want to negotiate to that benefit of them being more self-centered.
Yeah. So remember the whys at the top of the show, okay? We're not asking you to set boundaries to make your child's life miserable. We're asking you to set clear and healthy boundaries to help your child feel safe and secure. And so it's worth the conversation. It's worth the work. And, as we close, you got to start early.
Yep.
We learned this the hard way. Our two oldest sons, we started them as toddlers and preschoolers, and then our three youngest children came into our home and into our life at age 11, 10, and 7. And they really did not have an idea of what healthy boundaries were. And to start at that age, it was hard. And I felt like I was banging my head up against
and it continues to show different things of challenge. And again, it's what you walk through. But this is what Linda and I do for a living, and we still are a work in progress, right?
Yeah.
And so it is part of, once you're in there, you go, okay, I need to rethink some of this. I need to be coachable here. I need to stick to my guns. So again, I think it's just that whole idea of recognizing that you have an ultimate responsibility, and that is to prepare your child to be able to take care of themselves and to someday have their own family.
To have a secure and healthy adult, not a friend in the moment or a child that's happy with their tablet in their hand. It's, how do I raise a healthy, well-adjusted adult? And so that's what we were hoping to help you with in today's show. And if we can help you, please reach out to us at rocksolidfamilies.org. You can even make an appointment through our website. At the bottom of every page, it has a link to our scheduling app. And so we would love to walk alongside you. Again, like Merrill said, we are not perfect. We don't have all the answers. We are a work in progress.
We won't let you talk to our kids.
But we do know that God's word is where we go to. And we test everything we do and hear and do and say against what God tells us to. And so if it's in the word, we follow it. If it's not, it's up for discussion. And that's where we roll as parents.
Yeah. All right. So as we would like to close things out, we want to thank our sponsors again, Maxwell Construction and Casey's Outdoor Solutions. We also thank all you guys for listening and sharing the show. And if you think that something we've said today has piqued your interest for yourself or somebody else, please share that with them. So again, thanks again for listening to Rock Solid Families, building a stronger community, one family at a time. Make it a great day. Rock Solid Families wants to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions for sponsoring the Rock Solid Families podcast. Casey's has grown to be one of the largest and most unique garden centers and gift shops in the Cincinnati tri-state area. Whether you are looking to take on that next landscape project or simply add a little home decor to your house, Casey's has you covered. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Call them today at 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home.